Hi everybody and welcome back. This is Allen, and in this video we are going to learn what CSS is, its syntax and the main topics such as selectors, the box model, etc. so that you can start coding in CSS with just this one video. So let's get into it. CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets, is a style sheet language used to make web pages look good by controlling their appearance and layout. In comparison to HTML, which handles the content of a web page, CSS takes care of the presentation of this content. CSS defines how the content is displayed on a web page, including the layout, colors, fonts, and other visual aspects. Regarding its syntax, CSS syntax consists of a set of rules that define how HTML elements should be displayed. Each rule typically consists of a selector and a declaration block. Selectors target specific HTML elements, then the declaration blocks, on the other hand, contain one or more declarations separated with semicolons. Each declaration itself consists of a property and a value. They are written in this form of key-value pairs separated by a colon. The entire declaration block itself is surrounded by curly braces. Now let's just take a look at selectors. Selectors are patterns used to target specific HTML elements to apply styles to. There are various types of selectors, including simple selectors, which select elements based on the element name, ID, or class. In this example, the element selector selects all paragraph elements on the page, making them center-aligned and with a black text color. The ID selector then uses the ID attribute of an HTML element to select a specific element. And since the ID of an element is unique within a page, the ID selector is used to select one unique element. In contrast to the element selector, the ID selector begins with a hash character followed by the ID of the element. In this other example here, we have a class selector which selects HTML elements with a specific class attribute. To select elements with a specific class, we write a period character followed by the class name. Then we have combinator selectors, which select elements based on a specific relationship between them. The descendant selector matches all elements that are descendants of a specified element. The example here selects all paragraph elements inside div elements. There are also child selectors, which select all elements that are the children of a specified element. The following example selects all input elements that are children of a div element. Pseudo-class selectors select elements based on a certain state. This selector here selects all div elements when we hover over them with the mouse and sets their background color to blue. There are also pseudo-element selectors which select and style a part of an element. The first line pseudo-element is used to add a special style to the first line of a text. The following example formats the first line of the text in all paragraph elements. The last selector type we're going to see are attribute selectors, which select elements based on an attribute or attribute value. The following example selects all input elements with a required attribute. Okay, so I have opened up Visual Studio Code here, and after creating a basic HTML page, I just filled it with a bit of code. As you can see here, the page consists of three main parts, which are the header section, the main section, and the footer section. All of these three elements do not add some specific styling to the page, but except for the fact that they make the code more readable. So in the header section, we put what we want to be on top of the page. In the footer section, we write what we want to be on the bottom of the page. And in the main section, we basically write the main part of our application. These three elements also just serve to give some additional information about the page to like search engines or a screen reader and so on. And here inside the header section, I have just inputted a navigation element as well, which basically serves to input a list of links. And inside the navigation section, here we have an unordered list with three list elements. Each list element contains an anchor tag, and I'll actually redirect the user to the index.html file, since this is actually the only file we have in this project. And as you can see on the right as well, this basically gives us the idea of a navigation menu that we see in basically every web page. Then in the main section, inside this main element, we have 3 paragraphs inputted inside these paragraph tags, and on the end, inside this footer element where we input what we usually see on bottom of the page. Usually you can see there the name of the page, and then this copyright symbol. Here I have used, this is what's called an HTML entity, which basically just gives us this copyright symbol here on the right. And right now what we're going to do to this HTML page, we're just going to see how we can add styling to it with CSS. So there are 3 main ways to load CSS into our HTML file. The first one is by using inline style. Inline style basically means that we have to write the styling to each specific element in the code. Let me just give you an example here. So if we would want to write the styling for this paragraph element, we're going to use the style attribute. And let's say I'm playing with the font size property, and I'm setting the font size of the text in this paragraph element to be 18 pixels. Pixel is basically like a size unit, a common size unit in CSS. And if I save the file, here we should see the text here is a bit bigger. So this is how the inline styling works. Here we actually do not use a selector, which we saw before in the video, and we just use this style attribute. And what's wrong with actually this method is that if we would want to actually apply the styling to other elements, let's say to other paragraphs as well, we are going to need to input it in each specific element, this styling. And another drawback is the fact that the HTML actually should only contain the content about the web page and not the presentation and the styling. The second option, how we can actually load CSS into our file, is by using the style tag inside the head element. So we can go in the head element here and use the style element, which is a set of tags. And inside here, we basically write the CSS code. Let me just delete what we wrote here below. And to actually apply this styling to each specific, to all of the paragraphs in our page, I'm going to access them with the name of the element, then curly braces. Here I'm putting the font size to be 18 pixels. Even though this way we can see that the font size for each of the 3 paragraphs is now changed, it's bigger. And even though this second method is better than the first one, than the inline styling, because by just 3 lines of code we have applied the stylings to each paragraph, this is still not the best way to write CSS styling, because this way the code that we write in here can only be used inside this single HTML file. For this reason, now we are going to see the third and basically the recommended and the best way to write CSS code, which is by writing code in an external CSS file. So I'm going to go here in our project and I'm going to add in the directory here a CSS file. It is a common practice to call it style, but it's not necessary, and it just should end in .css. Saving the file, and here we basically need to include exactly the code that we wrote inside these style tags. So the syntax is the same. I'm saving the file, and now to link this style.css file with our HTML file, I'm going to need a link tag or a link element. So link, we are going to need this attribute of rel, which basically means relation, and naming it style sheet, because this is what this file that we're connecting to our HTML page is. It's a style sheet file. And then we need to basically, this tag ends in a / and this greater than symbol. And this tag also takes another attribute, which is the href for hypertext reference, where we need to write the name of the file that we are linking to. So click enter, and if I save the file, we still should see that this file has these styles applied, written in our style.css file. Okay, so let us just go ahead and change different parts of our HTML page. Now, as we can see here, this is not as good looking as it should be, the elements in our navigation menu. So what we can do here, let me just access the unordered list element. And I'm just gonna need to remove these bullet points here. So I set using the list style type property and setting it to none. If I save the file, we should see the bullet points being removed here. And all of these properties, actually these CSS properties that we have for each element, basically it's not that I learned them by heart, you just need to open up the documentation and search for them. And right now I would actually want to input these elements of the list, not like in a column, but in a line. For this, I'm going to need to access the li element, open up the curly braces, and I'm setting the display property to inline. If I save the file, we should see that they are now in a row. And this styling that we see here for that this home, store, and about text have, they basically have this because they have inherited it from the anchor tags. So let me just remove the underline and the color blue that this text has, these anchors have. So I'm just taking the anchor element and I'm putting the color to, let's say, black, saving the file here. We should see the color changed, and what I'm gonna do as well is I'm gonna remove the text decoration by writing here text decoration equals to none, so that we remove this underline here. And if we click in each of these anchor tags here, we should be redirected to index.html, since this is how we wrote this, because this is the only file that we have in this page. So let me do something else now. Here we have selected each element by using the element selector, but we can also use an ID. Let's say I'm going to access the footer element. I'm going to give footer element an ID like footer1. Save the file and give a second. Go back here to access an element by its ID. I'm going to need to use this hash symbol, then footer1, the name of the ID. I'm opening up curly braces and I'm putting the text align. I'm setting the text align to center so that this text is centered in the page here. And what I can do else, actually, we have seen the element selector and the ID selector. The ones I actually use the most is the class selector. And let me just go here. If we would want, for example, to put some specific styling to only 2 paragraphs, not all of them, let me just give them a class of for paragraph. We can name it whatever. To the first 2 paragraphs, I'm giving this class and saving the file. I'm going here. I'm accessing this class by a dot symbol and then pair. I'm opening up the curly braces and I'm setting the, let's say, the font weight to bold. If we want to bold the first 2 paragraphs, let's say. I don't know why we would want to do that, but just if you would, that's how you can actually do it. And to select basically the whole page, we're gonna need to write this star symbol here. And then here we can, let's say, change the background color or change the font or anything about the whole page. This affects the whole page. Let's set the background color to, let's say, light smoke or light gray. What did I do there? So just light gray. Save the file. We should see the whole file has this light gray color. The CSS Box Model is a fundamental concept that describes the layout and rendering of elements on a web page. Each HTML element is actually rendered as a rectangular box composed of several parts, which are the content, padding, border, and margin. To actually see these 4 parts of an element, let me just make the page a bit bigger here, and I'm gonna here select this My Page element. click on with the right of the mouse and click then inspect. Here underneath we see that the footer consists of the content here, the padding, which is 0, border is 0, and the margin, which is 0. So let's begin with the content. The content is the innermost part of the box and represents the actual content of the element, such as text, images, or other media. The content area is determined by the width and height of properties set for the element. Then we have the padding, which is the space between the content area and the element's border. It provides internal spacing within the element and helps create separation between the content and the border. Then comes the border that surrounds the padding area and defines the boundary of the element. So it provides a visible or invisible border around the content and padding. Borders can have different styles, such as solid, dashed, dot, etc. They can have different widths and colors as well. Then there is the margin, which is the space outside the border of the element and provides spacing with the other elements. Margins do not have a background color and do not contribute to the size of the element itself. To see how this actually works, let me just minimize the page one more time and go to the style.css file. Here, where we selected our footer by the ID, let me just input a width, a manual width, and set it to, let's say, 200 pixels to our footer. And then I'm going to add padding to it, let's say 20 pixels. I can make the margin to be like 30 pixels. And I'm giving it a border of size 1 pixel, then or like 2 pixels. I'm making it solid, so it's not dashed or anything like that, and the color, I'm setting it to be black. If I save the file, this is our footer now, so let me just I inspect this one more time here, and we can basically see that the width is 200 pixels here. Then we have the padding, which is 200 pixels. The border is supposed to be around 2 pixels here, and we see the margin, which is the space with the other elements, as you can see on the left here, which is on bottom, on top, on the left, and on the right. So this was the introductory video for CSS. I hope you found it easy and helpful. If not, feel free to comment down below with any question you might have. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.